Okay. Sometimes you pull from the list, and we have a huge one, as I've told you numerous times, of verses that we are going to be doing in the near future. And sometimes you just get an idea, and it comes to you, and then it's like, hey, let's do it this week, so why not? This movie is a very awesome movie. I love Training Day. I think Training Day is phenomenal. But a lot of people probably slept on Narc. So it's going to be interesting to hear a perspective from somebody who actually watched it when it's theatrical. So we're going to go into that.
I didn't. I saw it when it came out on DVD.
Oh, I thought you watched it in the theater.
No. Our theater had it for a week. What happened was there's 21 producers behind Narc.
Yes.
At least. And after it was made, Tom Cruise and Paul Wagner saw it. And they loved it, so they wanted to release it wide. So it went to all theaters for like 1 week. I remember when it came out, I saw this poster in the poster case, but nobody knew what it was. And it was here for a week and then vanished. And then it got really great reviews, so I was curious about it. And I had heard some comparisons to Training Day, of course.
Yeah, of course.
So, I checked it out when it came out on DVD.
So yeah, I feel dumb for saying that, but it's okay. This opening is not the greatest as it could have been. I will say right now, this is going to be a battle between some dirty cops, just like I've been alluding to the last several days.
Narc is kind of on the fence as far as dirty cops, but yeah, it's pretty much there.
So we're going to see what happens when Training Day battles Narc. AJ, take it away.
Alright. Basically, just apart from the gritty and grim nature of both of them together, obviously, the reason to compare them is you have the one cop that has the wife and the baby and just wants to lead, a normal life. Nick Tellis is a little more hardcore than a fucking lot more hardcore than Jake Hoyt is, but they both just kind of want to live the family life and kind of just stop crime from kind of a not so corrupt way, and they're teamed up with these hardcore, don't give a shit, we'll break anything in our way cops that basically changes the way they look at it. And both of them have rappers in crucial roles. With Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre have crucial parts in Training Day, and Busta Rhymes has a big part in Narc. Macy Gray is also in Training Day, but I don't think she fits the rapper criteria.
Seems a little bit one-sided when it comes to the rapper quotient.
2 and 1.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to start with Training Day. Yes, Training Day. I was decided, fuck it. The movie starts and the sun rises. It's one of those, I always love the 24-hour movies if they do it right. And it actually starts with the sun rising. And then you have Jake Hoyt, who's Ethan Hawke, in a completely frauded Oscar nomination for supporting actor, even though he's in every almost frame. Because Denzel is Denzel. Everybody's supporting Denzel. Unless he's in Glory, winning an Oscar. But anyway, as he did here. So you see Jake and his wife's there, and there's the baby, and he's happy, and he's nervous. He compares going to his Training Day to tryouts for baseball or something. And before Alonzo Harris, Denzel's character, is even on screen, we get a hint of just the kind of person that he is. Because he and Jake have never met. And obviously he's never met his wife, but the phone rings while he's in the kitchen getting ready. And his wife answers it. And we don't hear him, but she starts laughing, almost like she's being flirted with. And then she hands the phone to him. And it's Alonzo on the other end. And he asks Jake, hey, you getting ready? Everything good? And he's like, yeah, I was just on my way out the door. And he's like, oh yeah, you going to roll call? And he's like, yeah, just on my way to roll call. And he's like, okay, well, you don't go to roll call because only patrol ferries go to roll call. He's like, you come and meet me at the diner and we'll go from there. And we'll meet up in the office. Of course, the office is his confiscated vehicle that he has completely torqued as his own. So, we have this great scene at the beginning, this diner that's used in all kinds of movies. He sits there, and Alonzo's just sitting there reading the paper silently. And he's already kind of got an intimidating presence, because the thing that this movie did was, all Denzel had done up to this point was good guy roles. Or at the very least, likable anti-heroes. At least. In 2001, Denzel doing this part blew people's minds. He's got the chain, he's got the hat, he's got the glasses, he's got the facial hair, and he's just reading the paper. And he says, Jake, why don't you order some food and I'll pay for it. And Jake's like, I already ate at home. And we're like, oh, well, that was, nice of Alonzo to just offer him food, but okay, that's just the kind of guy he is. His presence by itself is a little intimidating, but he's still just kind of there. We know he's kind of the, patrol ferries do a roll call guy. But then, within seconds, we realize the kind of person he is immediately, how intimidating he can be, just by when he says, Jake starts to try to do small talk, and he says, Jake, why don't you tell me a story? And he's like, well, what kind of story? He's like, well, you see, this is a newspaper that I read because it entertains me, and with you talking, I can't fucking concentrate on my newspaper. So if you're not going to let the newspaper entertain me, then you're going to entertain me and tell me a story. And then Jake starts to tense up, and he's like, well, you know what, maybe I'll just order some food. And he's like, man, you already fucked that up. You better tell me a story. And then where he just basically, he tells the story about the DUI and that he had a female training officer. The female training officer is the only thing Alonzo cares about. Because there are two things that Alonzo is in the movie. Violent and horny.
Yeah.
There's the great moment where Jake just starts to tell the story, and Alonzo just says boom and scares the shit out of him. He's like, you just gotta be prepared. And then he gets pissed off when he learns that there's no sex stories about the female training officer, and even though they prevented a murder as the point of the story, his response is, you spent all that time with a female training officer, and the best story you have to tell me is a drunk stop. And then he does the, okay, you do have a dick, and he says your dick is right here, and on each side of that dick is 2 pockets. You reach into those pockets, and there's money, and you use that money to pay my bill. And it just continues right into the next scene. I always love this scene because it just says everything about the character you need to know, and the movie has just started. The movie has been on for like 5 minutes, and they're leaving the diner, and it's raining, and Alonzo's not even paying attention to the rain, and he's crossing the street, and the cars stop for him as he crosses the street. And I believe one of them actually honks at Hoyt because he's not, the same royalty. And we get that immediately, but we also get a lot of different. He's not just. This is an Oscar-winning performance, so it's not just going to be him being hardcore at the end. There are some sides to this character, even though his monster side is most prominent than the others. Like these, the scene where he goes to Eva Mendes. Earlier we had a scene where he talks about how he asked Jake if he's married, and he's like, yeah, I got my queen too. I've got, the one and only. And they go to Eva Mendes' apartment, and we learn that she's just like, kind of, he has like 4 children, but they're not like with the same one. Because I'm pretty sure, I've heard sometimes that Eva Mendes is his wife, but the way he refers to her, I think she might just be like a side item. Especially since she only has the 1 kid, and he says he has 4. So there's been some confusion there. I think Eva Mendes is just some girl that he, knocked up once. But he's one of those guys that basically, even though he has women on the side plus a wife, he's he treats them all to the same degree. He's one of those guys. Because he's got that, amongst them, behind the monster that is Alonzo, there's still the charming guy that is Denzel in this character. So you have the scene where he's with Eva Mendes' kid, and just kind of, he has that kind of soft moment, but then there's the scene right before that where he's pulling into the street, and you know that he's royalty because you have Terry Crews there, who, he's such royalty here, even, nobody really likes him, he's more like a tyrant, they basically like have a way of signaling birds so the whole neighborhood knows that Alonzo is here. So he's like a kind of a king pulling into the castle, basically. Or like amongst the commoners. So, and another great thing is the scene where he makes Jake smoke the pipe, because that basically sets up something for the whole movie, where obviously the whole point is that it's Jake's training day. And with the way Alonzo is, you never can tell when he's being fucking crazy or if Jake's just being tested. Like when, I think Jake just assumes he's being tested when Alonzo says, just, smoke this. But then he stops the car in mid-traffic and puts a gun to Jake's head and says, if this were the street, you'd already be dead right now, so you would need to smoke it. And he makes him smoke the whole thing. And before he gave it to Jake, he laced it with PCP. So...
What a friendly guy.
But then there's that other side to him, like, you see him just kind of his, chummy side, like when they go to Roger's house for the first time, the guy that Scott Glenn plays, who I believe is an ex-cop, I think they said. But then after all this and all this intimidation, and they even have a shootout outside the Sandman's house, where he can just nonchalantly get into a shootout and then just go about his day. It doesn't matter. But then after all this, there's this interesting scene for Alonzo's character where they go to visit the three wise men, which are Raymond J. Barry Harris and Tom Berenger, as like these really, really high up law officials that are also as corrupt as he is. And after you see all this, he goes with them and he sits at their table. And when you see Alonzo amongst these guys, he's almost like he is to them what Jake is to him. You kind of see the power they have over him. So he's not totally, completely inhuman. Despite what the ending makes you believe. We'll go to the ending when we get there. And it's just this, as the movie progresses, we learn more and more about just how, like, normally we think, like the scene where Jake prevents a rape, and instead of arresting them, he just, like, ties their hands behind their back and then, like, puts a knife in their face and puts guns in their faces and says he's gonna kill them, and then just leaves them there intimidated. Because for Alonzo Harris, that's enough. If Alonzo Harris intimidates you, chances are you're not gonna do anything again anytime soon. So we get to that scene after he's killed Roger, and Jake truly sees just how corrupt and down deep everything goes. And Alonzo gives this speech about why things have to be the way they are, and why it doesn't matter that Roger's dead, and why, he deserved to die anyway. And Alonzo has basically become so corrupt, because there's a scene at Roger's house where Roger actually looks at Jake and then Alonzo and says, you were just like him once. And Alonzo is so far gone that he's on these tirades about how he's basically convinced himself that all the corruption he's doing is basically the right thing to do. And it's consumed him so much that he believes everything he says when it's totally outlandish. What's the line? This shit ain't chess. This shit's chess, it ain't checkers, is the line. So, and I would say that's probably why Denzel has his second golden person. Because I believe he was kind of a surprise one, because Russell Crowe was the favorite to win twice in a row, I think. And this is not a traditional, even if it's Denzel, this is totally not a traditional Oscar role or movie. It's kind of a miracle Ethan Hawke got in. So, with that, we talk about the rest of the story, which is the screenplay doesn't get enough credit, because most people just kind of dismiss it as it's a decent cop movie that Denzel is great in. That's basically what a lot of people, especially critics, say. A lot of critics actually aren't a fan of the movie itself. Mm-hmm. But when you look back on it, this screenplay is so perfectly articulated. It's interesting because there's a lot of things you don't notice, like there are little details, just the tiniest things sprinkled throughout the script, that you don't really think about. Like, they go in your head and then go right out because they just seem like little things. But they always find a way to come back. Like, the scene where they cross the street at the diner, and when they're getting in the car, he tells Jake, take that menu off my windshield and put it in the glove compartment. You just think, okay, Alonzo's going to get hungry for Chinese later. And that ends up being the thing he uses when he breaks into the Sandman's house and says, this is the warrant I have. And when we first get to Roger's house, and Roger says, just very nonchalantly, you better stay low, you know the Russians want your head right now, right? That's not even really touched on again for a while. That's just a little detail they throw out there, and obviously it ends up being Alonzo's complete downfall. There's the scene where obviously he makes Jake smoke the pipe, and then later on in the scene when they've killed Roger and they're taking all the money so that he can pay off the Russians, his response to Jake is basically, because Jake is saying, you know, we can't do this, and he takes the gun from him and basically says, I'm not letting this happen, and then Alonzo says, well, all these cops here are going to agree with me, and right now you have drugs in your system. So, and then there's the saving the girl from the rape that eventually saves Jake's life, where she basically in passing says, my cousins are going to come back for you, and they're going to fuck you up, because my cousins, you know, are whatever. And of course, he goes and they meet Smiley, who is Cliff Curtis, and he's there with, like, Raymond Cruz from Breaking Bad and all of them. And it turns out that Smiley and them are the cousins that she was talking about, and they almost killed him because Alonzo abandoned him there. And that little thing saved his life. And of course the big come full circle thing where he's talking about, this is also at Roger's house, when he's talking about how basically they're going to kill Jake if he doesn't abide by them, and basically he starts to say Jake's obituary to him. And the very last thing we hear in the movie is Jake pulling in and going inside, and on the radio we're hearing Alonzo's obituary. And it's the exact same thing, just with slightly difference. Obviously, because obituaries all are written similarly. Now, as far as the last 15 minutes of this movie, it's more like 20 or 25 minutes. People, especially critics, tend to wonder what exactly happened, because I actually think it's something to condone for. A lot of people feel like the last 25 minutes of Training Day is a totally different movie from the one you've been watching, because it starts to, when it gets solely into the plot with the Russians, where we learn from Smiley that the thing they've been talking about is Alonzo went to Las Vegas and something went wrong and he ended up beating a guy to death out of anger, and that guy was really, really important, and now the Russians are basically going to kill him if he doesn't pay them off like $1 million. You'll notice this plot was kind of borrowed with the Michael Shannon storyline in Premium Rush.
Yeah, just a bit.
So, he's got to get that money to them by midnight, or the Russians are going to take him out. But Jake wants to stop this whole ordeal from happening and arrest Alonzo before any of that can happen. And it basically turns into an action movie, where he and Jake get into this big, hardcore action fight. You have Jake jumping off the balcony and onto the car. You have them beating the shit out of each other, but then that stops and you have the big scene, the one scene everybody remembers and everybody is still quoting all the time, where Alonzo is surrounded by the whole neighborhood and he's basically trying to tell them what to do, and they pull a gun on him and they take Jake's side, and the whole neighborhood is turned on him and they're not going to basically take his bullshit anymore. And there's the great moment where he keeps telling Jake to shoot him because he says he won't. I always love the scene where he talks about, you know what happens if you shoot a cop in the back? They give you the gas chamber. And you know what the gas chamber smells like? Pine oil. That's right, you head into a pine oil hit. I like that more than the King Kong line, actually. Yeah. And you'd be playing basketball in Pelican Bay, all that stuff. I'm sure fucking Kevin Hart quotes that. Yeah, he didn't ride along.
Mm-hmm.
That whole scene where, in my opinion, a lot of people say that's what got him the Oscar. I think Denzel's Oscar was secure. That scene just happened to be in just the right place that put him into untouchable territory.
Yeah, definitely.
The scene with the kid alone, I think, is enough that probably got him there. Now, lastly, my theory on this. I kind of like to compare. I haven't really heard anything like this. I'm sure the theory's out there, but when I watch Training Day, I kind of like to compare it to The Devil and Daniel Webster, with Alonzo being the devil, obviously, because with while Daniel Webster like had his soul, Ethan Hawke. Yeah, I'll just call him that. Fuck Jake Hoyt. He is Ethan Hawke now. He has like his nobility and his honesty and his wanting to do things the right way. And Alonzo is doing everything he possibly can to seduce him into this corrupt world and basically saying, if you give that up, you can have, you can make detective and you can be untouchable and you can have anything. You can have all the money in the world from the stuff we get from, from what we take. And I always found that to be kind of an interesting way to look at it. Because that's just a cool, ages-old story since the beginning of time. And I think it fits in perfectly well here. It's basically like the Making a Deal with the Devil movie as a modern cop drama. Only Jake manages to spend the whole movie and never actually give away his soul or his nobility and honesty. So that's pretty much everything I just said is what I think makes Training Day so great. Which is a lot of things. It does. Obviously, the movie does have its following. To my understanding, pretty much all cops, real cops, love Training Day. I guess it's really just the critics that have a beef, but it's because like the last 25 minutes pisses them off. That's it. When he and Jake actually start like fighting like they're in an action movie, I think is what pisses critics off. But I think it's interesting the way that it does feel like you're watching two different movies when you watch the beginning and when you watch the end. But the way every piece of, like every little detail and every piece of the story managed to somehow get you there in just the right way. So, yeah, I think this, pretty much everything about it is kind of ingenious, really. When you, on the surface, it just kind of looks like your normal cop movie.
Yeah.
As far as Narc is concerned, Narc is a little different. It actually starts with this incident that Jason Patrick's character went through, where he doesn't want to do the cop thing anymore. He wants a desk job, so he can just like not do this because he's on a suspension because of the opening scene. The opening scene of this movie is probably the most famous thing about it, and the thing people really love about it. The opening scene of Narc is this really hardcore handheld chase scene where he's chasing this guy through like parks and backyards and jumping fences and all that, and it's this really frenetic looking thing. And it leads all the way to on a playground, and the guy picks up a little kid, and Jason Patrick goes and he manages to shoot the guy dead before he can hurt the kid, but he also accidentally shoots a pregnant lady in the thigh, and she almost bleeds to death and does lose her baby. And then there's like a whole 15-minute opening before they even show the title of the movie, but that is the opening scene. And if any scene was going to grab you immediately, that one certainly does. But the captain, who is Shy McBride, basically says, I will give you a desk job, but you just have to get me a conviction on this murdered police officer, Calvez, who was Ray Liotta's partner. So basically, his job is to team up with Henry Oak, who is Liotta, and basically find out what happened to him, and then if they can convict somebody in the murder, he can get his desk job and everything will be fine. Because he's also got the wife and the baby and all that, and he doesn't want to, be out there risking his life anymore. He's a lot more hardcore than Jake Hoyt is, though. Like, it is kind of a bad cop scenario. Like, both of them are the tough, I'll beat the shit out of you cop. Now, since we talked so much about Denzel, let's talk about Henry Oak. Henry Oak is this massive, hardcore dude. You can see Ray Liotta not only put on 25 pounds, but is also wearing a fat suit on top of that. And he's got the beard, and he's got the shotgun that he goes everywhere with. And the first time we see him, he's in an interrogation room, and he's bleeding down the side of his head and down his neck. And he's just questioned somebody, and then somebody comes walking in, somebody they just brought in, and Oak's immediate instinct is to take a pool ball. I don't know what a pool ball is doing in his office, probably for this particular purpose. He takes the pool ball, he puts it in a sock, and just starts to savagely beat the guy down. This is his opening scene, this whole thing. He's bleeding and he beats a guy down in 2 separate incidents. So, and he's that hardcore through the whole movie. He has, unlike Alonzo had the kid, but Henry Oak actually does have a really sensitive side that we get to later, but for the most part, he's the really hardcore guy. There's a scene that I love where they're trying to get answers from like this meth head, and they're interrogating him in his house. So finally, and I choose my words carefully here because his words weren't chosen as carefully. He takes the guy, he smashes the guy's head through the wall, and then brings him back out and says, "I'll have you wearing half shirts and halter tops and braiding a black guy's hair." And we basically follow them around as they go through the suspects and crime scenes that basically, in one way or another, lead them into what could be the direction of his partner's killer. They go to, there's a really funny scene with a drug addict played by John Ortiz from Fast and Furious and Silver Linings Playbook, who's a great actor. He plays a guy whose junkie girlfriend set his dick on fire. So he set her hair on fire, and they have just come into this crime scene as it has happened. And then there's the a really disturbing scene where they find a week-old corpse in a bathtub where a guy accidentally, he looks like he's murdered or committed suicide, but what happened was he was a junkie who was smoking weed out of a bong, and then he dropped it and it broke, and he didn't have anything to smoke out of. So he went to smoke out of his shotgun and forgot there was, like, a round in there, and when he lit it, accidentally blew his end off. So, but yeah, even though there's that, we kind of go into the softer side. Like, there's one downside to Narc is the scenes with Jason Patrick and his wife are like the really, really cliche, "You're neglecting me, I thought you were out of this, I'm leaving you," wife. Those scenes don't really do much as far as impact, but there is one scene where we really get inside Oak's character, and he's talking about how he had a wife who died of cancer, and basically that is what has triggered him to be, because he was like any normal, like we see him in flashbacks, and he actually looks like Ray Liotta, like normal Ray Liotta. And then kind of slowly as time progresses, after his wife is dead, he's kind of grown the mustache, and he's getting bigger, and he's getting more hardcore. And then by the end of it, he is the huge monster we see here. But he's still got that heart, because he also, we get the story of when he went into a house and he found a 10-year-old girl in a closet who had been getting pimped out by her family for rent. And then there's the other side where he basically is like a family friend of his partner, and he basically takes care of his wife now and his kids. So, but then we get one side of that and then another side of that immediately, because there's a great scene where Jason Patrick's interrogating her, and then he comes in. And then he says, he's basically nice to the kid and he's nice to the wife, and then he says, "Hey, we need to go outside and talk." And then he turns into the Ray Liotta we all know and love, and basically tears into Jason Patrick about being there and interrogating her. And it's a really great scene. This is like some of the best work Ray Liotta's ever done some of these scenes, and that is like saying something because Ray Liotta is fantastic consistently. It's a little as far as the direction's concerned, it's a little. This was Joe Carnahan's first real movie before he did like Smoking Aces and The A-Team and The Grey and stuff like that. And he did one like really low budget movie before this, but this was his first real movie. And you can kind of tell it kind of has that I'm a director, I've got to have originality and flair thing to it. Like you have the split screen and then you have like the four square, scenes. And it's sometimes overly flashy. Like you see, anytime somebody does drugs, it suddenly gets like into zoom ins and shaky cam and all that. Or if somebody has a flashback. Which obviously he's kind of tended to go out. Like Smoking Aces was also that kind of frenetic, but now that he's made movies like The Grey, you can tell he's kind of grown out of it a little bit. So, that. And then basically we reach the end. Well, it's not really the ending. The ending of this movie is a great one set half-hour scene where they track down Buster Rhymes and another guy. And they basically are the ones that were there when the cop was killed. So basically they're pegged as the murderers. And while he's torturing them Reservoir Dogs style, the movie throws us this huge curveball from out of nowhere where, well, it depends on how predictable you think cop movies are, but where it's possible that maybe Oak had something to do with it, or maybe Oak actually did it. And the question is are you going to believe them, or are you going to believe him? And there is a big reveal. There's like a bunch of twists and turns in this half an hour. And since normally I'd go a movie from beginning to end, but since Narc isn't as well known, if maybe somebody comes across this video and this is their first time hearing about it, I'll just not say anything else. But the last half hour of this movie is some of the most gripping shit you'll see in a cop movie. So, and that's a credit to Joe Carnahan also wrote and directed, like he does everything. I think the only thing he didn't write and direct was The A-Team. Having said that, I'd take Training Day every day of the week. I think most people would. But Narc is actually kind of its own thing. While it's got kind of a softer side than Training Day, but while also being really grim and unpleasant the way Training Day is all the time. But yeah. So Narc definitely lives up to the love of a movie like Training Day, but Training Day will always be Training Day. So that's it.
Alright, so ends another Versus. So next week, you know what's coming out next week, so you probably can figure it out that we're going to do a little bit about Once Upon a Time next week. So that's going to be what we're going to delve into next week. Should be a fun one, actually. So any parting words for this Versus?
That's it.